There's really no denying that our history, especially our intellectual history, is just dominated by men. It's important to recognize this not just because we need to correct this wrong in the present, but because understanding who we are, the history of our entire species, requires that we know what really happened. We often hear stories of women taking up roles in war and politics, but they have also made fundamental contributions to things like philosophy and the progress of human thought. In fact, you'll find that many famous male philosophers, from Jean-Paul Sartre to Karl Jaspers, all the way back to Socrates, were humbled and taught by wiser women. So in this video, I'll talk about some of the most important women of history, women you must know about if you have any hope of getting a full picture of the human condition. But before we get into it, I just wanted to mention quickly that if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Engaging with the video really does go a long way. And, as always, thank you to all of you who have supported us so far. It's impossible to cover all of the women from the history of philosophy. There are just so many. But I've chosen 5 for this video who I think have had the biggest impact on history in a lot of ways and have definitely shaped my own thought and life significantly. I would also like to say up front that I'll do my best in this video to give you the info on these thinkers without subsuming them under the lens of them helping the male philosophers of history. Unfortunately, especially the further back in time we go, this is often the only opportunity women were afforded in terms of making a contribution, or at least the ones that they would actually get credit for. So some of these examples do work like that. I just want to say, this is not women simply helping men, but teaching them something that otherwise they probably never would have been able to understand or come up with themselves. The first person we'll cover is Diotima. She was a philosopher and priestess from ancient Greece, who is primarily known through the writings of Plato. In Plato's Symposium, she's portrayed as Socrates' teacher on the subject of love, or eros. Diotima introduces the concept of the ladder of love, a philosophical ascent where one progresses from physical attraction to individual bodies to the appreciation of all forms of beauty, and ultimately to the love of wisdom and the divine. Her teachings are considered foundational in the development of Platonic thought on love and beauty, which is central to the entire Platonic tradition. Despite her significant influence, it's unclear whether Diotima was actually a historical figure or a literary creation by Plato, which is often something we have to deal with his work. But I wanted to include her because this ladder of love theory would go on to influence the development of the Western world for nearly 2,000 years. You see, Christianity itself, especially in the Middle Ages and later in the Renaissance, was heavily based on the concept of love and its capacity to carry us up to the divine, or to simply more fundamental things about life. I always think of Diotima when reading Dante's Divine Comedy. At the beginning of the book, Dante is too terrified to begin the journey through Inferno. And despite the appearance of famous Roman poet Virgil, who is sent to guide him, he is still tempted to remain in fear. It's only the appearance of Beatrice, his lost love, that gives him the strength to ascend to Paradiso. Without Diotima, I think much of our history would actually look quite different. Our next thinker, and she's definitely a real historical figure, is Hypatia. Hypatia of Alexandria was a renowned mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher in late antiquity. She was the daughter of Theon of Alexandria, and she was well educated in both mathematics and philosophies of Plato and Aristotle. Hypatia became the head of the Neoplatonic school in Alexandria, where she taught philosophy and astronomy and went on to make significant contributions to these fields. She's known for advancing not just the philosophy of the time, but also developing astronomical instruments and undertaking significant scientific experiments. As a philosopher, Hypatia taught Neoplatonism, of course, a school of thought that emphasized the existence of an ideal realm of forms as developed by Plotinus, who follows in that Platonic tradition. She was known for her deep understanding of Platonic and Aristotelian philosophy and her ability to engage with complex philosophical debates, which is how she ended up being the leader of this entire school of thought, which would then be the basis on which Western thought would be developed. Hypatia's leadership in the intellectual community of Alexandria serves as a powerful example. of female intellectual authority in antiquity, and the fact that she attained this status despite the extra hurdles she faced meant that she was likely far more brilliant than her peers. In the end, though, she was murdered by a Christian mob due to political and religious tensions. This highlights the dangers faced by women who challenge societal norms. Her life and death have made her a symbol of the struggle for intellectual freedom and the persecution of scholars, particularly women, in history. And this is something that we definitely do not want to forget. Émilie du Châtelet was a French mathematician, physicist, and philosopher, known for her significant contributions during the Enlightenment period. She's known for her academic work through her French translation and commentary on Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica. Her translation, which included her own notes and explanations, clarified and expanded on Newton's ideas, especially regarding the concepts of energy and momentum. Châtelet made original contributions to the concept of energy conservation too. She argued, contrary to many of her contemporaries, that the energy of a system is proportional to the square of its velocity, what we now understand as kinetic energy. Her insights laid the groundwork for the later development of the principle of the conservation of energy. She was also a philosopher, engaging with the works of Leibniz, Newton, and Voltaire, who was also her companion. Her work, Discourse on Happiness, reflects her thoughts on the nature of happiness and the role of intellectual fulfillment in achieving it. She also explored the relationship between reason and emotion and the limitations of human understanding. Speaking of Voltaire, the famous playwright, scientist, and philosopher, he often referred to her as not just his peer, but his teacher. This is another lesson to take away in this video. A man whose name is easy to find and known by many considered himself to be, in many ways, the pupil to a woman who one may never encounter when studying philosophy or science. She even had to publish her dissertation under a pseudonym because no one would have read it otherwise. These next two are 20th century thinkers who are some of my favorite, and they have impacted my life not just in my philosophical work, but on a deep personal level as well. Simone de Beauvoir was a French existentialist philosopher, feminist, writer, and social theorist. She is perhaps most famous for her groundbreaking book, The Second Sex, which is considered a foundational text in feminist philosophy. In this work, she declared, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman," arguing that gender is something of a social construct rather than a biological given. She analyzed the ways in which women have been historically oppressed and defined in relation to men, laying the groundwork for modern feminist theory. One of her books that I think is a must-read is A Very Easy Death, in which she details the last years of her mother's life and offers penetrating insights about the type of life we live and the human condition in general. She also wrote The Ethics of Ambiguity. She came to say, The Mandarins, Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter, and so many more. Even though de Beauvoir had better opportunities than someone like Châtelet, she was still forced to take a back seat, and still is historically. The much more famous Jean-Paul Sartre, her lifelong lover, actually failed the examinations in France his first time around, and only after having her as a tutor did he pass, and actually come in first. Also, we have significant evidence that many of his ideas were either hers to begin with, or emerged from conversation they had. This is not to say that Sartre isn't great in his own right, but it is yet another lesson for us about the biases we hold and how far their effects reach. Finally, we have Hannah Arendt. She was a German-born Jewish philosopher and political theorist, widely regarded as one of the most important thinkers of the 20th century. Her work explored the nature of power, authority, totalitarianism, and the complexities of modern political life. She was forced to flee Germany as the war approached and made a name for herself in America. She was fearless in the stances she would take. For instance, she traveled to Adolf Eichmann's trial and made the penetrating insight that his crimes should draw our attention to the subtle ways that evil moves in society instead of focusing on the small number of monsters who emerge. She argued that Eichmann's blind allegiance, his stupidity in the face of evil, were more to blame, and that if we treated him just like a monster, we would miss the real lesson and condemn ourselves to a repeat in the future. This is the type of insight that would make people rage at her, but it's hard to deny its truth. While one evil leader can destroy the world, it is only because they have the support of millions. and many of those people give support under delusion or stupidity, not because they have evil designs themselves. Arendt also wrote other famous works like The Origins of Totalitarianism, The Human Condition, and The Life of the Mind, all of which I recommend. I only covered 5 figures in this video, but there are so many more. If you're interested in the brilliant women of our history, please go online and explore. I used historyofwomenphilosophers.org as one of my sources for this video, and that is a great place to start. Please leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you like this video. Thank you, as always, for watching.